Welcome to the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Hello, I am seriously so excited for today's conversation with Praise Santos McKenna. Praise has used her camera to tell stories of artisans in Kenya, an adoption from India, and a cacao farmer in Guatemala. Her work has been featured in Vogue and Forbes. She combined her social impact approach with her wedding photography to birth ethical weddings, a movement to popularize weddings that have positive social and environmental impacts. Her work with ethical weddings won a 20 on the Rise award by the 80,000 member plus Rising Tide Society. Today, Praise leads the branding studio Come Plum and is the host of the Branding Your Business podcast to help small businesses check branding off their to-do lists. When she's not teaching, photographing, or traveling, she and her husband Barry and their dog Bubbles try to sniff out the best pastries in San Francisco. Praise and I talked about her journey to entrepreneurship and lessons learned over the past 10 years, how she set herself up to take a sabbatical this year, how ease has been manifesting in her life as of late, what a personal brand is, and the number one question you can ask yourself to better understand yours, throwing out the shoulds in life, work, and personal branding, what leadership means to Praise today, and so much more. Without further ado, here we go. I am so excited to be joined today by Praise Santos McKenna. Praise, welcome to the podcast.
Liz, it's just fun to hang out with you. So I'm so glad we can share another space together. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay. Oh my goodness. The feeling is so mutual. The day that we got to spend together recording for your podcast in your studio was like one of my favorite entrepreneur moments of the last 6 months, easily hands down. And I'm so excited to get to have another podcast conversation with you and ask you some questions.
Yeah, podcasts are now our excuse of just hanging out, which, you know what, I'm for it.
I am also for it. Well, would love to jump in with maybe just a quick introduction, if you wouldn't mind briefly saying hello and telling our listeners a little bit about you.
All right. Hi, Women Who Change the World community and podcast listeners. I will say you are the luckiest to have truly the best guiding you through these introductions with incredible women. I'm so honored to be here on this podcast. Liz and I have had our circles kind of crossing over, Venn diagram, a lot of just Bay Area impact-driven women spaces and coming together in that way. Liz most recently helped me at a day retreat that we had here in San Francisco. I was so honored for her to lead a portion of one of our charge up retreats. And I just love being in her universe. And so I get to do things like that, which are events. I also get to do a lot of visual marketing. I got my start as a photographer, and I run a brand studio actually called Come Plum, where it's our mission to see 10,000 women inspired and resourced and confident to do the thing that they are called to do. Because I really believe that when women are in their sweet spot, when they are aligned with what they value, we become better neighbors, better citizens, better partners, better parents, better friends. And so if things seem off in the world, it's because women aren't given the space or permission to do the thing that they're called to do. And so that's my mission here on this earth, is to kind of align those things. And I can do that through photography, from helping you build a website, or just creating a space to listen, creating a space to share wisdom, or hosting a retreat. So you'll see me do those things in a variety of ways. But that's my mission. And I really love being able to share spaces like this and really inspiring you all to live inspired lives. So that's a little bit about me.
Oh my goodness, what a juicy introduction. So fun. Thank you so much for sharing, Praise. And it's been so fun to be in your entrepreneurial orbit. I feel like I think our paths maybe first crossed back at the assembly like early 2020. And it's just been so fun to stay connected through the Charge Up retreat and like other fun ways. I have a feeling there's more to come for us in the future. And I'm just so excited to have you here. Well, I'd love to maybe get started with you mentioned Come Plum and a little bit about what you do at Come Plum, but would love to hear a little bit more about the studio and about your work there and what you're up to on a day-to-day basis right now.
Yeah, when you are an entrepreneur, a creative entrepreneur, these are your babies, right? Like Come Plum is a baby of mine. And I say that, but she's been around for 10 years. And so she's a fifth grader now. And I look at her and I love her. And I'm just here to guide her to be the business she was made to be because she has evolved a lot over time. I kind of got my start, honestly, when I was 16 years old. My older sister had a camera and I would ask her if I could borrow it. And I taught myself photography like in my teenage bedroom and just figured out how to use a camera. And then one of like the youth leaders at my church saw my work. And as a 16-year-old, she was like, Praise, you're really creative. Can you take my engagement photos? And I thought to myself, you're crazy because I don't think I have the capability or capacity to. But it's also one of those things as you don't have to be confident to do the thing that you're actually really wired to do. Sometimes you just have to take a leap. Or sometimes you have to trust someone else's faith in you too. And so that gave me the courage to start. And so I had been doing photography on the side for a while, but as a child of immigrants, being a full-time artist never was an option or an idea in my head of what to do with my life and my career. So I still took the traditional route, went to school, went to college, graduated with a degree in communications, and actually got my career started in the nonprofit sector. I love the nonprofit sector. I love impact work. And so I moved to San Francisco and worked a couple years in the nonprofit sector. And I was good at what I did. I worked a lot in marketing and in storytelling. And I love the work that we were able to do. And there were little signals that were going off like, okay, you're really great at engaging volunteers. You're really great at leading programs. That there's a part of me that still wanted more. There's a part of me that still needed that creative itch to be expressed. And I knew that because honestly, there were things in my life that were not going right. I was also really anxious, really depressed, even though I was like graduating in my career. Some things weren't sitting well. And I'm in my early 20s thinking to myself, I feel so depleted. I don't think this is how I want to live my life. I need to step back a little bit and question what makes me really come alive. And so I call that my quarter life crisis, where I moved home for a little bit and really had to sit and think, okay, well, I still do light up impacting people, but there's a part of me that can't just be all for people. What is the thing that's also fulfilling for me? And it kind of became clear if I was going to spend my time, I had to do it not only loving people well, but also making pretty things. How could I also make pretty things in the process? And so I was just reminded like, okay, we've been doing photography on the side. We never took it too seriously. What if we actually went for it? And so I gave myself 3 months to try this photography thing, to leave my salary job and go for it. And so did that, but I was also working so many other jobs to make life in San Francisco work. I was a graphic designer, I was an actress and model, I was a brand ambassador, basically whatever could help me pay the bills. But then after about a few months of doing that, I could focus just on photography. And even with photography, I was kind of doing everything. I was doing events, I was doing real estate photography. It's such a big field. And then I kind of came back to that same question. What is actually giving me energy and what is actually giving me life? And I realized that when I photographed a lot of women who are like me, women who are trying to figure out what the world needs, and then we're going out and making it, those are my favorite photo shoots. When they hired me to do their websites or hired me to take their new profile photo, I left those photo shoots so energized, and those people became my people. And that's how we met at the assembly. I was just trying to find those people and trying to surround myself with those kind of people with a similar ambition as mine. And so that's how we got focused more on brand photography. And so Come Plum has evolved over time. And so you'll see a lot of our work as a brand studio. And I started business coaching because it kind of evolved for my love for these women who are changing the world. Hint, hint, why I love this podcast is because I would deliver these photos to these women, and I realized it was just sitting on their computers or sitting on the cloud. They didn't do anything with it. And I realized if I really wanted to see these women shine and do the thing that they were called to do, I had to equip them in ways more than visual. I had to step back a bit and see, okay, maybe they're not sure what their mission, vision, and values are in the world. Maybe they're not sure of their strategy of even how to use these photos. Let me step back a bit and create spaces where they're also getting brand foundations, getting brand strategy. So when I come in with brand expression, they actually know how to use that well. And so that's why our brand studio is a little more all encompassing. And now we lead retreats because I keep on stepping back more. Okay, I'm helping women in their business, but actually in their personal lives, they're also really burnt out, or they're not celebrating enough, or actually doing the important leadership, internal leadership work that they need to do to be able to do this thing that they're called to do. What if we created spaces where we're not just differentiating or delineating their professional life and personal life, but we just look back at the woman and say, we want to see you thrive in all the ways. And so that's why we've also added retreats. So I'm telling you, my little child that is my business has evolved over time. And I've just kind of kept on responding and seeing where the energy is, and also seeing in myself what is the right fit for me and what do people need. And so I think it'll continue to evolve, and I'm just here for the ride. And to be able to share a story like this and be astounded by it, it's really humbling, and it fills my heart with so much gratitude.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love hearing your story. And I am so here for a gratitude moment. I think sometimes it's so interesting how having the opportunity to share our stories can really remind us of our own magic and potency, and like the countless ways that things unfold beyond our wildest dreams when we first get started. I can only imagine what it's been like to be in business for 10 years. I personally am just coming up on the 5-year mark right now, which it still feels weird to say out loud. I'm like, how has it been 5 years? And also, how has it only been 5 years? It feels like forever. I'm curious, what do you feel when you look back over the past 10 years are some of the biggest aha moments or lessons that you've learned as an entrepreneur, having done this for a decade?
I know that for this podcast, it's mostly audio, but I want you all listening to know that as Liz was saying, she's celebrating 5 years. I'm like putting my hands up, celebrating, kind of like raising the roof, because it's so cool to look back and to see how far we've come. But also time is this weird construct. How has it already been 5 years? And how has it only been 5 years? That is a very real thing. And I ask myself the same thing too, of like, oh my goodness, it's been 10 years, or has it only been 10 years? I feel like that is a very valid question. It is interesting being able to look back and kind of a retrospective of a decade of work. And I've just been chewing on a lot of things and aha moments of perhaps a lot of these lessons I learned are pretty cyclical, right? There's some lessons I've learned in year 1 that I'm learning a deeper version of that lesson in year 10, right? We often get encouraged, like, you know what? It's good to make mistakes. And so, like, especially the first year of you trying anything, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to do it. And then I expected myself in year 10, like, okay, right? I know some of this stuff. I shouldn't make as many mistakes, but if I want to try anything worth trying, honestly, it's going to be something new. It's going to be something bold. It's going to be something courageous. And so I have to get used to making a mistake, or giving myself the grace to honestly make the same mistake and not give up, even though I'm making that mistake again. I've heard someone say that life is often taught of in spirals instead. It's not that we just learn the lesson and we complete it and it's linear, but we just kind of get deeper into that work. And I feel like the learning the mistakes over and over is probably the unraveling of the perfectionism that has been ingrained in me for a while, to really just like, you know what, just get it out there. We still have to learn this lesson. Maybe it's a different thing we're launching. Maybe it's a different kind of person we're working with, but okay, we don't have to be perfect. We're making mistakes again. It's not something that's easily solvable, and almost just getting used to it. I'm like, okay, these are lessons in life where things just get deeper and hopefully richer, or I learn the same lesson from a different perspective or a different dynamic of it.
I love the reflection of the spiral. Yeah, the spiral sporadic nature of learning. I find that so often it's like I will feel like I've learned a lesson in one context. And then the universe is like, oh, that's cute. Here's the lesson in another context. And here it is over here. And you're like, oh, I thought I learned that one already.
1,000%. Because like another thing that I reflect on, it's not only making mistakes, another thing that I realized too, that I even just gave you all like a 30-second, 1-minute backtrack of like, oh yeah, I'm just continually finding where the energy is. And that's what I'm doing to, launch new things in the business. And I say that. And yet sometimes I still find myself doing things because this is like the entrepreneurial roadmap in 2024. You have to do X, you have to do Y, and have to do Z. And I'll like try to put myself in these boxes, but like Praise, we've gone through this before. Like the boxes don't really fit for you. How do we have to learn it again in 2024 that we have to find where the energy is for you in this season? And maybe that's going to come later. Maybe it's going to come at your own time. And I am still learning that. Like even when we started our podcast, people have been asking us to do it. And I'm so glad that I did it at the time that felt right for me. But now we're also trying to like launch a course, but I'm putting just like this imaginary timeline in my head instead of stepping back like, no, wait, we have to wait where the energy is and then we have to find it. So again, the universe, God is telling me like, Praise, you're going to just learn this lesson again and again. The spiralactic, if that's a word, nature of it is just so many aspects of it are so true.
Totally. When I think you hit on something that feels so true for me right now in this moment, and I feel like it's something we've been talking about on the podcast a lot lately, this idea of just because something is the way that you should do it, or the tactics or the approach that like they, and I'm using air quotes as I say this, that they say is like, there is the approach. Similar to you, I find that every time I try to like get cute and create a strategy and like launch a thing in isolation or like even with my team, but without not only connecting with my people, but also listening to myself and my body about what sounds fun and what sounds joyful and pleasurable and what's genuinely exciting for me, then like it doesn't work the way that I wanted it to work. Like you, I'm like, I learned this over and over and over again. And I don't know why we have to keep learning it. But it's so tempting, I think, to think that there is an answer, like an objective answer for how to do something. And I think so much of what at least I found tough about being an entrepreneur over the past 5 years with the pandemic and everything else is that like the world is changing so fast that it's like not possible that there is a single answer for how to do anything, which can be so frustrating if you want to sit in it, but it also like can be really creative and inspiring on a good day.
Liz, yeah, I'm so glad you feel me because I was just talking to someone else. Maybe it was one of the gals on the retreat that most of my work, I've seen the theme in myself and in the women I work with is giving us permission that the shoulds can go away, that we don't have to do the shoulds. And so I love a good framework and I love a good strategy because it can make some things easier. But when we put that as the template or the way to go, it does take away the joy and the creativity. And honestly, like being in business and being in sales, I will tell you people's BS meters are refined. They know when you are passionate and inspired about something, and they know when you just kind of like copied and paste and are just like following the ways of doing things too. So it's also in a way to honor your people is to honor yourself of like, where is that energy and where is that inspiration? And 100% to what you say, this also makes us adaptable in an ever evolving, changing, dynamic world.
Totally. Well, you've mentioned a couple of things that I definitely want to follow up on. One, the retreat, and two, just like branding and personal branding. So maybe we'll start with the retreat first. I know you just came back from your first retreat in Mexico City, which sounded and looked like magic. I would love to hear, because I know, we've gotten to collaborate on a local retreat, and from the outside, it looked like you were really kind of building up to this Mexico City retreat moment. Would love to hear a little bit of your process and experience of building up to the retreat, and then would also so love to hear about the retreat itself and the intention that you had going in and what experience you had.
You know what? It's so good to reflect on it too, because I'll go back a couple of years. So we call these retreats charge up, and it's exactly what it sounds like, of leaving women feeling celebrated, inspired, and just like re-energized to do the thing that they are called to do. And the initial idea came, I remember it was March 2023. Women's Month was coming up, and I knew I wanted to do something to serve our audience. And I remember getting ready for the day and just kind of brainstorming to myself and asking myself, thankfully, the right question of what sounds fun? Where is their energy? And this vision came to me in that what women really need and what I haven't seen and what I even craved was a room full of women where women could stand up and say, I'm really proud that this, right? Like they didn't need a floral headpiece party, which I know I love. I love those. But I just felt there needed to be something more internal and spaces where women were celebrated and didn't need to compete with each other, but they could be really proud of things going on in their personal and professional life. And honestly, it sounded like fun. When the idea popped into my head, I'm like, we need to create a space like that. Let's do it. And so we started our first kind of in-person charge up event at a social club / co-working space I'm a part of. And that was, I think that was March 2023. And we really did something at the end where we stood up on a bench and everyone got to say, I'm really proud that this. And I loved it. I loved it because women were inspiring other women to be really proud of what they had accomplished. And that was kind of the defining thesis of it too. And so then we hosted another in-person event and made it longer and made it more of a retreat and really started to focus on, okay, we can be really proud and really fill up these women within 4 aspects of sweat, work, love, and play. Sweat meaning health. It could be your physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. Work can also mean so many things. Maybe you work for yourself. Maybe you're in a more traditional career. It's really how you spend your productive time. Are you a caregiver? How can we enrich your life with that? And then when it came to love, that could mean any relationship. I want people to, yes, know about your significant other, know about the children, your family in your life, but what about your relationships with your neighbors? What about your relationship with yourself? And then play. Like, what is the thing we're doing for fun? What are the things that we're doing that don't have to be productive or have an ROI? And I felt like if we integrated these 4 aspects into the different events that we held, it could build up to a woman leaving feeling inspired and celebrated. And so we kept doing these kind of in-person events. And I would just like ask people afterwards, like, so do you want to do this again? And then do you want to do this maybe somewhere adventurous and cool? And so I would just continue to actually ask the people who came, do you want to come to Mexico City with me? And it would just be an idea. But then after a while, enough people said yes for me to be confident to like put down a deposit somewhere and just invite people to go. So honestly, that came really naturally, and it came from a place of joy, and it came from a place of I knew what spaces I craved and I needed, and I could see over time that women were craving it too. And the crazy part about it is when the retreat actually came about, I'm like, okay, so I've hosted women for 4 hours, now 8 hours. Now could I do it over a span of 5 days with the same concept? It honestly worked. And what was really interesting, and I have to just remind myself, is that it was easy. Like the retreat felt ease. Like I didn't have to push so hard. I didn't have to like figure out the framework of it because I knew my people. I knew what they wanted and I knew what felt good and what I wanted to, because this whole thing kind of started from a place of intuition and joy, and honestly from good listening to people too. And so the retreat was just magical. We had a few other women lead workshops. I got to lead workshops. But what I loved about it is because I've also been to retreats that felt over-programmed to me, like that felt like there were no space to process. So my favorite part about the retreat is just blocking off the afternoon for women to be like, okay, we already did a workshop, we moved our bodies, and now here's free time. do you all need to sleep? That was some women's intention, was just to sleep. They are caregivers, they're in the sandwich generation, taking care of children and parents. And they just slept in and took naps or went on walks by themselves. And then some of them really wanted to see this beautiful city. And we went to museums, we went shopping, went out to eat. But whatever they needed, just trusting that the women who were coming knew what they needed to feel nourished and knew what they needed to feel fulfilled. And so it was my job, truly just like as a guide and as a space maker, to make sure that they had all the options and it was easier for them. And then I sat back and I was waiting for something to go wrong. I'm like, okay, did I not think of this? Did I not think of this? But Liz, it was easy. And that's something that felt so, so good. And so kind of to what we were saying before of some things also just don't have to be hard if we're actually just trusting that we're in the right spaces and we're actually excited to make the things that we know the world needs and that we know we need to. So it's the best. PSA for those listening, if someone invites you to go on a retreat, you should just go. You probably need it and you're probably going to enjoy it and not regret it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think there was just so much magic in how you articulated that. And I love that it was easy. I think so often one of my favorite coaching questions and life questions is this question, what if it's easy? And I think so often we over index on things that feel hard, and it's hard to trust the ease. But what a beautiful experience of following your joy and leaning into what you know to be true and then letting it be easy.
Yeah, maybe we don't hear that enough because I do feel like in the Western culture, we're like, it's the grind, it's the hustle. You got to work hard and give 150%. And I am all for people following through on what they say and dedication and responsibility and hard work. Yes, I love that question, Liz. What if it actually just works out? What if it's actually easy? What if it's a path that was made for you and all you have to do is just be brave enough to say yes and go for it? It's a bit of a mindset shift in our culture.
Totally. Yes, I could not agree more. And I also really appreciated your reflection on incorporating the spaciousness in the event. I find that as someone who's hosted and facilitated more gatherings at this point than I can count, the self-trust required to leave the open space that I think is truly what makes so many of these experiences magical is no small thing, because it's not only self-trust, but it's also trust of the group and your people that they will do what they need to make the most of the experience. And so I love how you shared how you designed the experience, because that processing time and that time to listen to yourself and give yourself what you need, I think is just so important.
Yeah. And the thing is, I don't know if 3 years ago, Praise would have done that. I feel like even just 3 years ago, I would have been like, no, we want to accomplish it. We want people to leave saying that this was the most, that she gave us this. And I'm like, no, maybe that's not our journey. I did take my first sabbatical this year, and I was just reminded of space is juicy. Space, honestly, taking a break can actually help you go further just because you give your mind and body and heart and soul time to breathe, margin. Even as a visual artist, we talk a lot about negative space. Is there a negative space in your life? Is there a negative space in these programs or get-togethers we're creating? As humans, we need it. So it is a really good reminder.
I am interrupting this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast really quickly to personally invite you to join the Girls Club Collective. The Girls Club Collective is an intentionally intimate feminine leadership lab for change agents and the personal and professional development community that you've been looking for. Don't just take my word for it, though. While you're submitting your application on our website, girlsclubcollective.co, please be sure to read one of the countless testimonials from our incredible members and alumni. There are so many benefits to being a part of the collective, which is designed around our signature feminine leadership framework. That means you'll have opportunities every month for connection, embodied strategy, visibility, and amplification, and so much more. Don't forget to mention our podcast in the Where Did You Hear About the Cohort section on your application. And now, without further ado, back to the episode. Before we get into personal branding, you mentioned your sabbatical, and I know sabbaticals are something a lot of my people have had different experiences with. Many people may be thinking about one for this year or the not too distant future. I'm curious, how did you know that you wanted to take a sabbatical? And I'll definitely also ask how you made it happen. But first, I'd love to hear what that inner knowing was that planted the seed.
I will tell you, it's also one of those things that you hear a lot about, honestly, that you should do, right? But I also think you have to be ready for it too. So I feel like I was getting encouragement from my own coach for a couple of years that I should take one, but it took me a while to wrap my head around it. Okay, I want to take one this year. And I also am a believer that it's hard to be what you can't see, and seeing someone who was able to pull it off and their business was still great and they didn't feel so nervous about it and that it was normal was also something really helpful for me to say yes to it and wrap my head around too. And so it took a while to marinate on it, but then once I made the decision, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to give it a try. Again, I don't think I'm going to do it perfectly, in air quotes, the first time, but I need to at least feel it out, see what it feels like on my calendar, in my body, in my mind, and see what it would be like. So it took a bit of marinating on my end to decide, yes, I'm going to do it.
Gotcha. So it sounds like you were really feeling into it. You held the time on your calendar and saw how that felt. And then how did you actually make it happen?
Yeah, the how I think will be very different for everybody, but I do think depending on your life circumstances, depending on your team too, it's taken me a while to build up my team to be at a point where they don't need me. And so that was a bit of training on our end too, to find the right talented people who could do what I do. And the thing is, though, I feel like what I do is honestly not that hard. I feel like even with our team of our photographers, I am such a fan of them. If you all hire Come Plum and work with us, I will give you the best person. And sometimes it's not me. I'm like, I'm such a fan of this person's work. And I'm just going to be with you, hand holding you as I give you our best person. So it's that kind of trust. Who are the people that I would even hire so that our clients would even want to work with them too? And people who had honestly our same values. And I knew that I could put the relationships that we have with our clients in their hands. They were just going to be good people who saw them as whole people. So I had to get that all in place first and our systems in place. And then I just told myself, okay, this is what we're going to do. When I checked in of what it would be like, a lot of folks asked me, oh, are you going to go somewhere? Do you have a wish list for what your sabbatical to be? And because I had been going so strong from the beginning of the year, my whole thing was not to have a to-do list. I wanted that juicy, empty feeling of being able to wake up and just ask myself, what do I feel like doing today? And that's what I was going to do. So there weren't really a lot of plans. Sometimes it'd be what do I want to do today? Is still stay in bed. That's great. And then whatever would be nourishing for me the next day, okay, what do I want to do? Oh, I want to take my dog out on a hike to Mount Tam. And so I would drive out there. It was really open-ended, and that became so nice. It just became so freeing. And so a week, 2 weeks in, even though I do go through withdrawals, I will say that first week felt you wanted to check in or you wanted to make a to-do list. That was my experience. But by week 2, I was like, this is nice. I can't imagine myself not having this month off now every year too. So I have since then committed to, I think we need this. I did it in July, and that's a nice mid-year point for me too. And so I was like, I think I'm going to do this every July. I think this is going to be a norm for me and my family too. So yeah, there's a few logistics of setting up your back end, knowing that you have people you trust, and also just acknowledging the withdrawal that will happen a little bit, and then getting a clear feeling of what you want to feel. And for me, that was the pressure of the not to-do list, and it felt really, really, really good.
That's so awesome. Congratulations. I feel like I started my business with the vision that I would take every August off, and it hasn't like quite looked like that. And I've also realized in recent years that July is a far better month for my business for me to be off than August. So next year I may be reaching out for totally off July tips, because I feel like I always start with the times that I've done this, I think every year, some version of it, I've started with like a full 5 or 6 weeks blocked off. And then it's like some stuff has crept in on either end. And then you're like, well, maybe just this one thing. And the boundaries are so important, I think, for finding that true feeling of spaciousness and reset that I know can be really hard to experience as an entrepreneur, and especially as the founder with an incredible team. There's so much trust and just a lot of systems and processes to have in place if you want your business to truly run without you.
100%. And I will admit, there were some things that were considered work that I had to ask myself, will I allow myself to do this? Because since a lot of our work, and I'll transition this to personal brands, is that I am actually still the face of our brand. A lot of people associate working with Praise when they work with Come Plum. And so there are still some things in the business, even though I'm training people to do it, there's still some PR things that I only still do. So a lot of our teaching I still do. Or maybe there's one podcast episode that was scheduled many, many moons ago that was still in July. I still did it. But I did ask myself, because some of these things could have been rescheduled. I asked myself, will this be nourishing or give me energy? And because a lot of the other things were off my plate, I really love doing that. And a lot of the things that it comes to being the brand and building the feeling and the reputation for what we do, I totally enjoy doing. And so I will give that caveat that there were some little work things that slipped in. I'll tell you 3 dates on my calendar that were still kind of worky, but it was more of okay, this is still going to be nourishing. I think I still want to do this too, which this is a fun transition to your other question about personal brands. And that is a lot of the work we do, since we focus a lot on brands, but oftentimes it's because there's this face or this person that people want to get to know, that gets them curious about the service that you offer or the offerings that you provide too. So personal branding is really interesting. For us as a studio, we say brand is what people think, feel, and say about your business, and specifically what they think, feel, and say about you and your business. It's truly the reputation that you have. And so I know that for me, what we create, when I ask people to be part of it, a lot of it banks on the past reputation of us also following through to our word, and also helping people feel a certain way after every experience with us. I have invested a decade into helping women feel inspired and resourced and confident. And so I'm really protective of the team members who come into our space, because they also have to represent that brand. I'm also in a way also very mindful of how I show up too, because if I am drained or if I am at my limit, I can't create spaces for people to feel inspired and resourced and confident. And so in that way, I also have to be a brand manager and have better boundaries so that I also show up in ways that are consistent with how I want people to feel. And so I know that's a big tirade on personal branding, but perhaps you can help me, Liz, with some specific questions that you feel your Women Changing the World podcast listeners might be noodling on when it comes to personal branding.
Absolutely. I'm so here for it. And I was like, oh my gosh, how is she going to thread this needle? I'm so here for it. Well, I guess I'm curious for anyone who's listening and who appreciates the importance of a personal brand. I think a lot of people in my world, I don't know, I feel sometimes I feel allergic to that phrase or terminology, and which I'm seeing you nod. I'm I wish there are better ways to describe it. We're just going to use that for now as placeholder. But what are some of your tips or recommendations for how we can make our personal brands memorable for people?
Yeah, memorable is a really good word. Memorable means sticky, or memorable also means they're the first person that comes to mind when it comes to X, Y, or Z. How do we get memorable? I will also want to use the word lovable. How do we create lovable brands? How do these household brands become household brands? I just watched this video the other day of a dad watching a Bluey episode for the first time. I have not watched Bluey yet, but just seeing his reaction and also realizing the brand Bluey has made is really incredible. It seems like they're very heartfelt, short episodes that really just like talk about the human experience. Like, what an incredible brand they've created. What an incredible, lovable brand. And how do we apply what we know from Bluey or Target or Disney? And how do we apply it to our personal brands in a more professional space? How do we become top of mind? Well, a lot of it is kind of going back to our brand foundations. What are your mission, vision, and values? What kind of impact do we want to make on the world? Or here's a juicy question. If you all are homework people and you're listening to this podcast, I want you to hit pause after I ask this question. What is the word you want people to use to describe you once you leave the room? I want you to chew on that. Like, what difference are you going to make because you're in that room? And when I say room, it could be you're speaking at an event. It could be LinkedIn is a room. Instagram is a room. Podcasting is a room. What do you want people to describe you as once you leave, once they stop the podcast, once they hit off, or once they log off? What is that one word? You can come up with 1 to 3 words, but these are going to be your guiding values. These are going to be things that you are going to implement into every experience that you create. And so I'll use like kind of my own story as an example too of the 3 words we love to use are inspired, resource, and confident. And it's easy for me to say now, it kind of rolls off the tongue, but I didn't know that those would be my 3 words when I was first starting. I kind of had to look back and see what were the spaces that energized me the most and what were those people's reactions, right? And so it could have even been when we were shooting a wedding. How did I want that bride and groom to feel? I wanted them to thank me afterwards for feeling like they could trust me or feeling that they could have kept doing this or be photographed forever. And they could tell me that I felt so prepared, like to be in front of the camera today. Or when I was photographing like entrepreneurial women, honestly, when you're taking a photo by yourself, it is so intimidating. And I just want to normalize that for everyone. You are 99.9% of the people I photograph. If you feel kind of weird, kind of like just in a weird place when someone puts up their big camera in front of you, totally normal. And yet, when I could transform the room and that space and leave them feeling like hyped to do the thing they were called to do, that's what I really loved. And so I took my past experiences and I just kind of wrote out, these are the feelings that I was really proud that I could create in those spaces. And so it was looking at my past, but also, okay, if I'm creating new spaces, if I'm now doing events, if I'm now doing a podcast, if I'm going to do a TV interview, could I still have those same core feelings and leave with that reputation, even though the medium changed too? So it's like when we think of big brands, right? Disney is everywhere, right? They have music, they have movies, they have theme parks, and yet you leave like with this bigger sense of imagination in all of it. And so for our personal brands, it's that consistency. That's how we can say things are on brand or off brand. You know, when you have a friend who had an off day, we often say that doesn't feel like them because it feels off brand for them, because what we've known them to be, their reputation over time has been that they make me feel like XYZ. And so it's that intentionality that we can start building into our brands. So as we show up in this ever evolving dynamic world, it feels consistent and it can be something you're really proud of. So I often tell people, to be honest, you already have a personal brand. You might not think you're brand building, but you already have a reputation. Let's face it, that's the truth. What if actually you put intentionality around it? What if you actually answered that question, how do I want people to describe me once I leave the room? And then you now put that into every interaction you make. And so that's kind of a very base understanding of a personal brand, but it will change the way you show up in the world.
That question is so juicy, and that's such good homework. Again, if you haven't hit pause to take a moment to figure out a few words or phrases, I highly recommend that you do that. I just love how you really brought that to life, Praise, and hearing you share how you think about your personal brand. I feel like that's so true of the interactions I've had with you. And I feel like even that question, it's like so fun. I'm like sitting, magic, fun, and ease. And like so fun to think about from that perspective, how I feel like thinking about showing up in any forum is like if I'm bringing those three things, then I know it's going to be fun for me. And it also will probably feel easy, and it also will probably feel magical. So thank you for that question and invitation.
I will confirm every moment I've had with you has felt fun, easy, magical, and you do light up spaces that way. I will say even your use of emojis on LinkedIn feel fun. They don't feel unprofessional. They feel easy. They feel magical. So if you all need a personal branding role model, I will say Liz is doing a very good job.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That means so much coming from you. And I do love a well-placed emoji on LinkedIn. So I really appreciate that. One more personal branding question, and then I want to transition to talk about leadership. When you think about like visibility and showing up, I mean, I do think a lot of, especially for founders, but not exclusively for founders, a lot of the personal branding work that we can really help us be more visible in our work. And I'm such a big believer in like how important visibility for our work is, even though I know for many of us, it's like way more comfortable to hide. And I feel like you also teach and support like countless women entrepreneurs on being more visible as thought leaders, as industry leaders. For someone who's listening, who's wanting to be seen and embrace the discomfort of being seen more maybe than they are right now, where would you recommend they get started?
I do think, to tie it all back in, there are so many shoulds out there, right? I can tell you in 2024, video is big, right? Like the algorithms are going to highlight video. And so you're going to hear a lot of shoulds. If you're not on video yet, you need to show up. And yet not everyone is wired for specific mediums, if that makes sense. I would really love for women to do a self-leadership check and just ask them, where am I most comfortable? For some women, it'll be written word. For some people, it will be spoken word. For some people, it will be showing up on video. For some people, it will be photography. There is a medium out there. And the thing is, you can also get really granular too. Maybe it is video, but you don't like looking extra polished, like speaking in front of lights, etc. For some people, they love just like, hey, I'm going to talk while I'm like in my kitchen because this feels the most natural, because maybe my personal branding values are authenticity or making you feel seen and heard. And so us just running errands together, or me like filming a video while I'm in my car in the parking lot, this feels more real to me. So I just want to encourage you all, like, release the shoulds, but also get really curious of what your strengths are and where you're comfortable. Because yes, you should be more visible. You can be more visible. In the sense that I want to encourage you is that the world needs what you've got. There is something inside you that you've been wanting to share, and it's one, it'll benefit you to share it, but two, there is someone out there who needs it. And if just one person's life could be changed, or if they could have a transformation moment or aha moment, don't chase after the stats, the data. Like, it's good to look at the analytics after, but think of the one person, talk to one person, think about your strengths and what feels most comfortable to you and aligns with your values or the reputation or the brand you want to make in the world. And then get curious and experiment. Try one thing and maybe you hate it. Record something and then delete it later. But it's us getting like the reps in and really honing in on our strengths and honing in on what our values and how we want to show up. That's like an easy way to get visibility. And that's a way that you can kind of shun off the shoulds of like, oh, but this person said I had to create it this way. Like, please don't quote me in saying that. I am telling you, like, you do you. And then the people who are meant to be magnetized to you, they'll be attracted to how you are putting this down. They will be picking up what you are putting down. And so that's my encouragement when it comes to visibility.
Yes, I love that so much. And I love that you use the word magnetic, because when I teach about personal branding and thought leadership inside GCC, we call the program Magnetic AF, because I'm such a believer that like the purpose of this work is to like draw your people to you in a way that feels like you. And just so here for the reminder that putting down the shoulds, it's such a gift and such a helpful reminder, I think, in so many dimensions of life, and this very much included.
Magnetic, 100%. I feel like that could also be another one of your values or brand values, because magnetic is part of the Liz essence as well.
Ooh, thank you. I will take that. The other topic that I wanted to make sure we talked about while we're here today, it's a big theme on the podcast this season, is leadership. And I have so many thoughts on leadership. I am so curious to hear your thoughts on leadership. I feel like we're in a moment when there's like such a need to redefine and reimagine what it means to be a leader. And it's so different than what so many of us have seen modeled. And I'm curious for you today in this moment, what does leadership mean?
Yeah, leadership is a very juicy word. And leadership is something I've also been chewing on a lot too. Because to me, the leaders that I've been magnetized to and been really attracted to, and when I've seen when I'm leading groups of people, what has worked best and also just has felt good and aligned is that leadership is listening. Leadership is really stepping back and being able to ask good questions, to create spaces where people don't feel rushed and spaces where people actually feel heard. To me, that is such a gift. A lot of people are thinking, oh, this person was a great leader because they were a great orator, or they gave speeches in this cool way, they had a great policy. And yet those things are pointless if they're just talking in an echo chamber, if they're just talking to themselves. Truly, like a great orator or someone who creates a great speech or who can captivate a room is because they get their people. It's because they took the time to have a lot of smaller conversations to ask the who, why, what, where, and why. And they left space for people to answer. And so it's like listening to the audience, I think, is true leadership, but it's also listening to themselves too. Again, we talked about some of my failed launches has been because I didn't listen to myself and didn't listen to like what I was actually drawn to. It was, again, going back to the shoulds. But if I took the time and the space to actually listen to what I feel drawn to, what I feel called to, or to reflect and look back of like, wait, a lot of my life experiences or a lot of my values lead me to this, that would actually make me a better leader when I combine that knowledge of myself and that knowledge of what the world needs and actually helping people feel seen and heard. That to me is really juicy, good leadership that I'm attracted to and I want more in the world.
Yes. And also, yay for embodying that yourself and going first.
Yeah, 100%. Again, this is a spiral lesson, Liz. I some days I do it better than others.
Totally. And that's like the joy of being human, right? And I think even back to what you were even first sharing with the spiral lesson, like being comfortable making mistakes and letting it not be perfect all the time is like such a work in progress and so worth it.
100%.
Well, I am so grateful to you, Praise. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It has been so much fun to talk about all these different topics with you, as I knew it would be. For people who are listening, who want more of you, who want more Come Plum, who want more charge up in their lives, like what is the best place or are the best places to find you, follow you, and keep in touch with you?
Yeah, I am so glad and I'm really excited to connect with you all listening to this. So you can find me online at comeplum.com. We actually have 2 quizzes on our website that I hope will serve you. One of it is like, what kind of business or side hustle fits your strength? So this could be a great way to listen to yourself and think, okay, wait, actually I could build this thing. And we have another quiz on there of what's your brand vibe? A lot of these things that we talked about of like, hey, what is the impression you want to leave? Like, what is the reputation you're building? Hopefully those 2 quizzes will help. So you'll find that at ComePlum, ComePlum.com. I'm on Instagram at ComePlum, on LinkedIn at ComePlum. And you can also listen to Liz's podcast coming up on our podcast, which is the Branding Your Business podcast. And so we're on the internet. Come find me. Come say hi. There's a human reading all the DMs. I love responding and interacting and just like hanging out and making new friends. So please find us on there.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Thank you so much, Praise. Again, it's been so much fun. We'll include links to all the things in the show notes. And I just so appreciate you coming on the Women Changing the World podcast.
Well, you, Liz, are a woman changing the world. So thank you so much for creating this space for us.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you're currently listening to it, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram at liz.best, that's lis.best, and you can find Girls Club Collective at girls_club_collective. You can also find us on LinkedIn by searching for Liz Best, that's my name, LASBEST, and Girls Club Collective. Join our mail list by visiting the Girls Club Collective homepage and scrolling down to the bottom. You'll be in the loop on upcoming events, retreats, and opportunities to make magic with us, and you'll also receive a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch.